there are not many things you can do in this life where you can have the same experience that your ancestors had. You know, feel the same type of pain, hear the same rhythms.
What is a hand tap tattoo?
A hand tap tattoo is something that's usually done as a ritualistic practice. And among Austronesian people, we do hand tap tattooing as a ritual practice to adorn ourselves with mana. If you play video games, sometimes you might see mana used for magic. Mana is a spiritual authoritative power that can be inherited or bestowed upon individuals, and we do that through tattooing. So it's a little bit different from going into a tattoo shop where it's more focused on the art. This is focused on the symbolism, the meaning, and the relationship that is denoted by the markings.
How does the process of doing it, like how do you do a hand tap tattoo?
So the tools that we use in hand tap tattooing are very different from what you would see in a tattoo shop. It's different from stick and poke. It's different from a machine. These are usually wooden handles with bone combs of needles attached perpendicularly to the handle at a right angle. And those carved bone needles are dipped in a soot-based ink, placed over the skin, and tapped right into the skin like this, in and out like a sewing machine. It's not easy because it's not like a machine where you just kind of set a depth, so to speak, and you find the sweet spot and you go. Every tap I am feeling how deep to go to the skin.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, right? Like looking at it, like, okay, that doesn't look super hard, but what's the intricacies of it? Like, why is this something that really has to be passed down and taught to people?
Well, one is the skill set of the tools is considered proprietary knowledge, if you will. This is handed down from teacher to student. We kind of guard our creation methods for making these tools because that is considered sacred knowledge. In our traditions, ultimately, tattooing came from our ancestors who are deified into gods. So it's a sacred process. And so my tools, because they've come through my teacher and his teacher before him, continuing on through the generations of time, the tools are considered to have a lineage. And they have a genealogy, if you will. And so that's something that we kind of guard because it's considered sacred. That lineage is considered sacred, and not anyone can just take it up. You have to be chosen. So I'll have, for example, people that will approach me and say, hey, I want to learn how to hand tap. I want to learn how to hand tap. But you might not be the right person for the job. I choose my apprentices. All of my tattooing siblings and teachers, they choose their apprentices. It's not the other way around. It's not like you go into a university applying for a job or getting accepted into a school or anything like that. We choose who gets to learn.
When you give somebody one of these tattoos, is it just about the tattoo or is other things that come along with it as well?
Well, before people come to me, I have to have them do a little bit of genealogy because even though, like, take the Philippines, for example, even though we're considered all Filipino, that's a nationalist kind of identity. That's a national construct. But within our islands, and there are over 7,000 islands in the Philippines, and there are at the very minimum about 132 distinct ethnic groups in the Philippines. But we do have our own nuances and distinctness. So you can have a design that's found among many cultures in the Philippines, but the size, the placement, the orientation of that design might denote what ethnic group it belongs to. So to avoid me tattooing somebody with designs that are not part of their ethnic group, I would, if I did that, could inadvertently be assigning them to a different ethnic group, and that means assigning them to a different set of ancestors, which would be incorrect. So there is this literacy, I would call it, in our designs that most people don't understand. You have to be literate in the designs. This is the type of conceptual language that we adorn our bodies with.
Yeah, it's not just like a pretty picture, so to speak. Like somebody who's getting a tattoo at the shop down the street is just getting like, I like this thing. So you have to be very specific about exactly what you're putting on someone's body.
Right. And in our tradition, the practitioner chooses the design for the individual, not the other way around. So in Western tattooing, you can go into a shop and you can say, oh, I like that. That's pretty. An example I like to use is someone can walk into the shop, see some tattoo flash, like they'll see a rose, for example. Oh, I like that rose, and I'm a botanist, and my favorite flower is the rose, so I'm going to get that put on my hand so I can always remember my love for roses. But in our traditions, that's already been done by our ancestors millennia upon millennia ago. So as part of that continuity of culture, we try to be as traditional, for lack of a better term, as possible, so that we assign people to the right ethnicity, for one, but also establish a relationship with the correct ancestors. It's thought that when we tattoo, and for context, Nick, before we begin any tattoo, we have to do prayers and offerings to our ancestors to invite them into the space. In our culture, it's considered rude to talk behind another person's back, which, is common in a lot of cultures. But even with those that are spirits, those that have passed on, we still want to invite them into the space so that we are not talking behind their back when we tattoo. Again, this is a conceptual language that we're putting on people's bodies, and so it's a form of talking about them, and so they have to be invited.
When we talk about kind of the symbols and you deciding the tattoo, are there certain themes that you go with, like certain designs, certain patterns that you go with?
Well, placement on the body, you can have a triangle on one part of the body, but if I put it to a different part of the body, for example, it changes the meaning of the design. So there's a literacy even with placement. And then there's composition as well. In a lot of our compositions in the Philippines, we denote the three major levels of our cosmology: the sky world, or the heavenly world, the earth world, and the ancestral realm. And so usually when we do our compositions, there's going to be elements that denote those three realms. So there's, again, with the literacy of the designs, there's an understanding of cultural concepts, as well as just, if you have somebody that goes to a tattoo shop that does tribal tattoos or whatever you want to call them, and they just say, oh, this is for your family, they're probably just giving you a very superficial level of understanding. Each of the markings has a meaning behind it or a concept behind it, but sometimes even oral tradition that's attached to it. So some of the designs function as mnemonic devices to remember cultural concepts, but even oral history. Some of our designs that we do very commonly, usually when people come to us for the first time, we start out with foundational designs that are what we consider a foundational design to denote our earliest beginnings or our origin stories in the Philippines.
Is it the kind of thing where you could look at the tattoos that somebody has and know where they're from, who their family is, what they believe, those kind of things?
Exactly. There are some designs that denote your role in society, in the community. Uh, we don't have things for like insurance agent.
Yeah, yeah. Accountant.
Right, no. No designs for accountants. But if you're an artificer or craftsperson of some sort, then there might be a design that represents that. If you are obviously a warrior, or if you've taken human life, there are designs for that. There are designs for those that are healers or traditional healers. Um, so you could potentially walk into a village in the old days and you could recognize who's in charge, who you need to steer clear of, who you would go to for help.
How long would you say it took you to get good at it?
uh,
That long. A long time.
yeah, yeah, and thank God for all the people that let me practice on them in the early days, literally practice, because yeah, some of my earlier work was rough. And so in the early days, there was hardly anybody doing this type of work. And this would be around 2012 is when I first started tattooing. And um, in my head, I always was stressed out when I started. I keep the calm demeanor. I want the person to remain calm. If I'm panicking, they're going to panic. But um, in my head, I was just like, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. I I don't think I became comfortable with doing the work for about 4 to 5 years.
Wow, that long.
It was very stressful. Now I enjoy it. I enjoy doing the work because I'm at a level of proficiency where I don't have to think about how to tattoo that. I can just tattoo it. Uh, and
Yeah.
and my students, they stay with me for a very long time as well. Um, one of my students, Natalia, she practices in Hawaii. She sat with me for 7 years. And some of my other students that haven't graduated yet, um, Johnny's been with me for going on 7+ years now. Shane, one of my students, he's been with me for 4 years now. They stay with me for a very long time so that they are proficient not just with the skill set to tattoo, but all the lore, all the knowledge, all the oral traditions, conceptual um, ideas that go along with the designs so that they're proficient with all of that as well. It takes a while to accumulate all of that knowledge so it's working knowledge, not just random factoids.
Yeah, yeah, you have to be able to apply it, not just know what the book says, so to speak. From a technical aspect of it, what's the hard part of it? Knowing how deep in the skin to go, or what, like, I guess.
That's one of them. That's part of it, knowing how deep to go in the skin, and everybody is a little bit different. Some people's skin is thicker than others, for example. And in the Philippines, we have sometimes quite a bit of racial mixture. When you have, not to sound racist or anything like that, but European skin tends to be tougher to tattoo.
Yeah, differences. People are different. Yeah.
If you come from a colder climate, your skin's got to be thicker just out of necessity, just to survive that. You go down to the tropical areas, people's skin is a lot more supple and has a lot more elastin. So working with different types of skin, especially when you have people that are mixed, and I'm mixed myself, I'm part European. Um, you never really know what they're going to pull until you get into it, and then knowing when to hit harder or when to hit softer, how many teeth on the tool you can get away with. Sometimes you have to go with a smaller size tool if they have, thicker skin. So I don't have to I don't want the process to be brutal. I want it to be as pleasant as possible. So if I have to hit them too hard, that's not going to be a good experience. I'm probably not going to do very good work. So having the discernment to recognize, the skin type and work with that skin type, that is just one aspect that my students have to learn with the technical side of things. And obviously, you cannot go to Walmart and pick up these types of tools. So becoming proficient with creating them. We like to use the traditional bone implements of our ancestors because the idea behind this is continuity of culture. And so when a person comes to us, in the words of my kumu, Suluape Kione, there are not many things you can do in this life where you can have the same experience that your ancestors had. Feel the same type of pain, hear the same rhythms, see the same markings, receiving it in a ritual setting. There's not many things you can do in this life where you can have the same experience that your ancestors had hundreds, if not thousands of years ago.
Are you ready for some harder/listener submitted questions?
Sure.
Does it hurt? It looks like it hurts.
All tattooing hurts. But what the general consensus is, I would say 99% of the people that we work with say that hand tapping is more tolerable than the tattoo machine. In other words, it doesn't hurt as much. And the reason for that is with the machine, those needles are going in and out of your skin so fast that it's a blur.
Yeah.
It's a lot more invasive. So when I'm working, it's tap, 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 tap. Much fewer punctures to achieve a line than with a machine. And it's rhythmic. The rhythms that I use when I'm tapping, what my teacher calls the song of the tools, those rhythms are also passed down while we work. And a lot of people will sometimes remark how that song is familiar to them, and it's soothing to them. So it does hurt, but people usually after the first 5 or 10 minutes are able to relax through it, and I have had quite a few people fall asleep while I work.
Can anybody get one?
So that's a good question. Can anybody get one? It really depends on the practitioner, how magnanimous they might feel. With our practice, we will tattoo foreigners, so to speak, but it's fairly rare. Usually there needs to be some type of connection to our culture. Even if it's just like a close friendship with Filipinos, where you participate or support our culture. Because we have to take into account that you're putting somebody's ancestors on that person's skin. So it's the prerogative of the practitioner if they want to figuratively adopt you into their family, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a much bigger deal. It's not the same as just putting a cat on somebody's leg.
Right.
Longest it's ever taken you to do one?
The longest ceremony that I did was 11 hours long. And we tattooed this young woman from just beneath her breast all the way down to her ankle. And that took a whole day.
What would you say is the average?
Most of the time I want to work within a person's endorphin response, which for males it's about 2 to 2.5 hours, and for females it's about 3.5 hours to sometimes 5 hours. once that endorphin response wears off, the skin usually gets a lot more angry. It'll get inflamed or swollen a lot more. And so I like to work within that endorphin response so that the experience is as pleasant as it possibly can be made, and the skin doesn't give me a lot of pushback.
Hardest part of the body to tattoo.
The butt. The butt's hard to tattoo.
Well, it's too soft, right? I would think the softness of it makes problems.
It's soft and very elastic, so my stretchers have to pull the skin for me to keep it nice and taut. A lot of people think, oh, they're holding this person down because it's so painful. No, they're pulling the skin apart so that I can go in there and and the tool can enter the skin and exit the skin cleanly without doing a lot of damage. So with the butt, it's very, very elastic. You have a lot of mobility there, so they have to really, really stretch hard. And even then, you want to have a very, very sharp tool to do that work so that the tool can enter and exit cleanly. The first time I ever stretched was for a butt. It was difficult.
That can be a real positive or a real negative, right? Like depending on exactly what you're looking at, you might not want to be.
Well, the first time I stretched was for Sua Isaiah Toitu'u. He's a Tufunga Tatatau from Tonga, and he was doing a Samoan bodysuit, which they tattoo the buttocks, and he was doing the inner butt cheek, and I had to basically part the Nile and hold that. And because it is very elastic, it's like planking. Stretching the skin is like planking for hours at a time. And so
Yeah.
you're trying to hold the skin and you're shaking, your arms don't want to work anymore. So my stretchers, for conditioning, my students, they plank so that they can have that strength to hold the skin while I work.
Yeah, that's one of those things that's not hard for a couple of minutes, but when you're talking hours, that gets really hard. What's the easiest part? Is there an easier part of the body?
Oh, the easiest part of the body? The easiest part of the body would be the outside of your calf. The skin is very taut there already.
How much of it is about the experience of getting it for people? Is it about once they have the tattoo, or is it about the experience of getting the tattoo?
Well, getting it in the ritual setting is that's an experience that a lot of people will never trade, even if they have a harder time through it. It's that experience. You can go and get a tattoo from any tattoo shop, but having this type of experience, like I mentioned, with my teacher, Suluape Kione Nunes, he says, there are not a lot of things you can do in this world where you can have the same experience as your ancestors. And so that is a big part of it, is getting it in the proper context and setting. But then afterwards, yeah, there is this sense of cultural pride and a deeper feeling of connection with people's ancestors. Sometimes people afterwards have dreams of ancient ones that will come to them and recognize that they got markings as well. It is a very spiritual experience sometimes. Sometimes when we're working, it'll feel like the room is crowded, even if there's just a few people in there. It'll feel like you're being watched. A few times we've had like a grandmother's perfume waft into the room. And we'll all smell this perfume that came out of nowhere, and the recipient will start crying. And I'll say, "Do you smell that?" And yeah, that's my grandma's perfume, or things like that. The other day we had someone that we were working on, and all of a sudden the smell of tobacco came into the room, and ancestor enjoyed smoking tobacco, so we would smell that. when we make the offerings, we invite the family, of course, that are unseen. And so it's not when I first started doing this, I was really surprised by these types of experiences. But now that I've been doing this for a while, it's more commonplace than not to have these type of very visceral experiences. Not just, oh, I think I feel my ancestor. No, it's something tangible that happens.
That's pretty much all the questions we got. Is there anything that you think that we missed or anything like that?
I think if I wanted to share, I want to share one last thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I know that everybody that listens to your podcast isn't necessarily Filipino or Pacific Islander, but whoever you are and whatever culture you come from, I would encourage you to take another look at your own culture. Even if it's been generations that where you've, like a lot of Americans, we tend to be very divorced from our ancestral cultures, living in this conglomerate that is America or the United States. But take the time to search for your ancestors, and if you search for them, they'll come and they'll find you, and they'll help you recover whatever practices you had in the past. Most cultures throughout the world had some form of body ornamentation. And if you take the time to do the research, do your due diligence, and dig in a little bit deeper than normal, you'll find what your people used to do. And when you find that and you're able to have the same type of markings that your ancestors had, even if it was a millennia ago, there's something really powerful about that, being connected and having that continuity. In our culture, we define ourselves, we create our identities around our communities that we belong to. Here in the United States, we tend to be very, very individualistic, and that's okay. But you are cut from a stone that is very, very old. You come from people that, all of us come from peoples that are very, very old cultures. And it is just really gratifying when you're able to make that connection again, wherever your people come from.